Lots to sort through after a busy weekend.
A great weekend of basketball. Some teams lost, some teams were able to pull through, but it's definitely always good to get some Big Ten play in December.
No doubt. I love the conference play early. I know for the coaches it can be challenging, particularly with all of the other stuff that goes on early in the season from the multi-team events that we see over Thanksgiving and ACC Big Ten and Gavitt games and all that. But you really get a good gauge on where people stand, and we'll dive into that as we get into the program, maybe sort through the top of the league and the contenders. But let's start with our big story, and it's just the games themselves from this weekend. We had some really compelling conference action. Wisconsin won a crazy one yesterday at Iowa. Penn State, as I mentioned, went to Champaign, beat the Illini fairly handily. Purdue nearly fell at Nebraska. That game went to overtime. Marquee non-conference games were a bit underwhelming, frankly. Maryland, narrow loss to Tennessee. Indiana had no answers defensively against Arizona. Let's focus on yesterday first, though. Wisconsin topping Iowa in OT. I do think it's fair to mention Chris Murray didn't play, Aaron Eulis didn't play for Iowa. So there's a little bit of a shorthanded Iowa team. But still, that's a really good road win from Wisconsin. Let's start with the Badgers, the team that won. What stood out to you about their performance?
Yeah, Wisconsin doesn't care who's playing, who's on the floor, as long as they can come out and get that victory. But that first half, Wisconsin really controlled the pace. I think it was 27-27 at half. So they really kept Iowa out of transition. They turned them over, never let them really get going. And then in that second half, you got Connor Essegian, a freshman, really stepped up and made some big shots. 14 points on the evening. I look at Gilmore and Crowell, kind of that production there at that 4 or 5 position. They combined for 20 and 10 and 7 assists. If Wisconsin get that type of production in the paint, they end up outscoring Iowa by 16 in the paint. And this is a Wisconsin team that likes to shoot a lot of jumpers. So with Crowell and Gilmore playing that way, you got Essegian coming off the bench giving production, and then Tyler Wall was just that Swiss Army knife. Defensively, he was out there locking up. 7 rebounds, 21 points, and then a pretty wave at the end to wave the fans goodbye.
This has not been a team that's been particularly good inside. They have a really low 2-point field goal percentage. They've been a bit better as a 3-point shooting team. So kind of to your point, to be able to get some production inside, I think helps a ton. I was impressed with the degree to which they turned Iowa over. Yeah. Wisconsin's not a team that typically turns you over a ton, and Iowa's one of the lowest turnover teams in the country. But, man, they came up some huge steals down the stretch. I mean, you think about, Wall and Hepburn coming up with plays that really changed the flow of the game. That's a little bit of a different element, I feel like, than what we typically see with Wisconsin.
Yeah, 100%. Wisconsin normally lets you turn it over by yourself, or they'll let you shoot as many open jump shots as you can and miss them. But last night, got 12 steals. Chucky Hepburn with 4 of them. They were just being intense, and they would drive the ball. They would come and dig on it. They would come and attack the basketball. And Chucky Hepburn is just he's a bulldog at the point guard position. There's times where you may see Coach Guard call Chucky Hepburn back from pressing the ball at half court because he wants to get up in you. He wants to add that pressure. But Wisconsin's style of play is to back up a little bit. But when those two guys get going defensively, it makes it really hard for anybody to handle the ball.
It is interesting. There are players who occasionally end up in the Wisconsin system who are a little bit more freelancers, right? Ben Brust is one who always jumps to mind. Trayvon Jackson a little bit would be a little bit of a wild card at times in terms of the shots he would take and his level of aggression. I feel like Chucky Hepburn kind of falls into that category 100%. With Ben and Trayvon a little bit. He's so talented, but there are times it does feel like you rein him back just a bit. And to his credit, he falls into line, right?
Yeah.
I also am struck by, and this is just nothing new with Wisconsin. This is who they are, but this is now 7 straight games decided by 5 points or fewer. Mm-hmm. They've won 5 of them. They just figure out a way to win. And it's interesting. I remember talking about this with Greg Gard. I've talked about it with Bo Ryan preceding him and kind of asking about executing down the stretch. And his point was, we treat every possession in the game exactly the same way. Yep. We don't look at the first possession of the game any differently than the last possession of the game. So we don't practice for late game scenarios necessarily in terms of what we do with our last possession. We're going to treat it like any other possession. It's just what we do. And I really think that benefits them in close games.
No, big time. And I look back to the Bo Ryan era where you had a Frank Kaminsky and Sam Decker on the same team, and they turn the ball over and they come out. Don't matter what point in the game, if you have a turnover, you come to the bench no matter who you are as a player. And that just builds up your program to know Guys have to take care of the ball to stay on the court. You have to take a good shot to stay on the court. You have to move the ball. And then down the stretch defensively, they move on a string. They are locked into their system, and Coach Gard recruits to his system. He doesn't try to go outside the box. Each guy has a role year in and year out, and it's just another year of it. Down the stretch, the ball goes where it needs to go on offense, and they're going to hit the glass hard.
Yeah, no doubt. So they are now 2-0 in the Big Ten. Why anyone ever doubts them, I haven't the faintest idea, but here they are. What about Iowa? It's tough without Murray in particular, but man, I saw a ton of positives in this game, starting with both of the McCaffrey brothers, who I thought were outstanding. And Patrick, look, Patrick's going to be a star. You know, Connor came back this year, and man, Connor had a fabulous game.
Yeah, Connor played, above his size, outside of his position, gets 17, 10, and 5 assists, moves the ball, was making shots. He was big-time defensively in the post. He was all around just the leader on the floor. Connor McCaffrey was definitely the coach on the floor last night, keeping the guys engaged. Wisconsin made a run. He got them together, huddled them up, make sure they knew what was going on. And that's what you need from your veterans. That's what you see around the conference. Certain teams don't have that type of veteran leadership, and that's what Iowa has. And then Patrick McCaffrey, I go back to the Big Ten tournament last season against Indiana. You had Keegan Murray on the floor, TJD. Chris Murray was out there, and Patrick McCaffrey had a 5-minute stretch where he was the best player on the floor. He has that kind of potential. It's just about him taking the open ones, playing off of 2 feet, being confident. I think this type of situation bodes well for Iowa without Chris Murray in the lineup, getting Patrick some confidence, getting him to be aggressive, Tony Perkins finding his way at that point guard position. Iowa being this close, figuring it out, not having their 20-point per game score, best rebounder, maybe best defender. I don't know if you hang your hat too low if you're Iowa.
I would agree. No, I just think sometimes guys, and certainly you would know far better than I would, but just as an observer, sometimes guys don't take that alpha role until they have to take the alpha role. And I think it's pretty obvious this team, to a large extent, is going to go through Chris Murray. But, man, Patrick McCaffrey is a big-time player. He is a really, really good player. And now he is thrust into that role. Again, you don't want that. They want Chris Murray back sooner rather than later. But the circumstances are what the circumstances are, and give Patrick a ton of credit. I think Philip Rebrach is a different player this year. There's a ton of positives for Iowa. It's a really good team. The rest of yesterday's action was non-conference. Let's start with Maryland. They dug a huge hole against Tennessee. They almost dug out of it. They certainly gave themselves a chance. I hate to oversimplify the game too much, but when you make 3 field goals in the first half, it's really hard to win basketball games.
2 of them are threes. You only make a 2-point field goal in the first half. 10 turnovers in that first half. They were minus 14 in the paint. They were minus 8 on the glass, gave up 13 offensive rebounds, which led to 9 second chance points. And with those 10 turnovers Maryland had, Tennessee turned them into 12 points. So you got 12 points off of turnovers, 9 points off of second chance points. They really just kind of punked Maryland in that first half. Maryland never got it going. But it's a tale of 2 halves. That second half, only 2 turnovers. And when you don't turn the ball over, you give yourself a chance. They end up outscoring Tennessee by 20 in the paint in that half. They end up turning Tennessee over 8 times. Jameer Young really got going in that second half. 16 big points, 7 assists all in the half. So when they settled down a little bit, moved the ball, didn't turn it over, hit the glass, things got okay.
It also feels to me like where Maryland is really going to get teams is with its pressure on defense. And I think Kevin Ward actually talked about this after the game, too. He's like, well, it's really hard to set up your press when you make 3 field goals in the first half. But they clearly gave Tennessee some issues with that press in the second half. And, they're going to get after people, Raphael. I think as you try to assess, well, what's Maryland going to look like under Kevin Willard? And one of the things that impressed me with him at Seton Hall is his teams look different depending on what his personnel was. But I think what this Maryland team is going to look like is one that's going to come after you really hard defensively, and that's kind of where they're going to hang their hat.
And they showed it last night. No matter if you're up 10, or down 17, they're going to keep playing hard, keep playing that stifling defense. They have long, athletic wings. They're able to get out in passing lanes. Martinez off the bench is one of the most athletic players in the league. Jameer Young is a feisty, bullheaded point guard that will pressure you 94 feet. And then Akeem Hart, Dante Scott, Julian Reese at the rim, they're just long and athletic. And that's a little different from your normal Big Ten team. You see Illinois, even with their athletes, struggle against that type of pressure. See Coleman Hawkins with his skill set, struggle with that length at the rim, struggle with that athleticism. Defensively, they're going to be one of the better teams in the league, I feel. And I don't know if they're going to go 2 for 16 from 3 again or not make a 3 in the second half, 0 for 8. I believe they will make shots as long as they take open ones, get in rhythm. But defensively, you can definitely tell this will be one of the better teams.
Yeah, you are hard-pressed, to your point. You go for the game 2 for 24. I mean, you're hard-pressed to beat much of anyone. And also gave up 21 offensive rebounds. I don't know about you. I worry a little bit about their frontline depth. I think that the top guys are really good. Julian Reese made a huge jump this year. He's a really good player. But again, and when you're kind of cobbling a roster together and when you take over in the way that Kevin Willard did, your first team is not necessarily going to reflect what teams 2, 3, and 4 are going to look like once you've tried to build your roster. But no doubt that's a concern. They've got UCLA on Wednesday. We'll talk about that one in a bit. Really intriguing game this week. Rutgers fell to Seton Hall 45-43. This was not the prettiest game by any stretch. Was this poor offense? Was it great defense? Or was it a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. I would say on Rutgers' side of it, you know they're going to bring the intensity defensively every single night. They probably have the best defensive team in the conference, but they got to get somebody to score the ball, somebody to take care of the ball. Rutgers, 19 turnovers in the game, threw the ball all over the gym. And then I look at Paul Mulcahy, Caleb McConnell, Cliff Amourier, which could be the best core in the Big Ten. You think about 3 guys returning. They go 4 for 18, shoot the ball 22% from the field, only get 19 points from those guys. That's not enough offensively. You know Ron Harper Jr. is gone. Geo Baker is out. They got to find somebody to score. Cam Spencer is more of a shooter, someone you can run off a screen, someone that can take the pressure off of Cliff in the post. He goes 0 for 4 from 3. They really struggled offensively, even down the stretch. They finished the game 1 for 8 from the field, and they only lost by 2.
Right.
They didn't score in the last 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Still only lost by 2 points. Right. They just need somebody that can throw the ball to, when in doubt, break the defense down, and go and get a bucket at the rim, or someone they can call up a play for, maybe come off of a triple screen, a stagger or whatnot, get some action on the other side, and throw that ball in the Cliff, and he's got to produce.
19 turnovers is disturbing, particularly in as low a possession game as this was. And that translates to 33% of their possessions. They turn the ball over. I mean, it is. You never say it's impossible to win that way, but it's really hard. They came close.
Yeah.
To your point, you lose the game by 2 points. And I do wonder, too, whether the Ohio State game beat them twice to some extent. I mean, they only had a couple of days to recover from that. That was Thursday.
Yep.
All right. I mean, this game's Sunday, so you're basically 2 days to process a game in which the Big Ten has come out and said it was an officiating error. So you're thinking in the back of your head, we should have won that game. We did in a lot of ways win that game, and now you turn around and maybe that beats you again as a player. I don't know. What's kind of the mindset there?
A little bit of it. And I would give that maybe to a younger team, inexperienced. But with those 3 guys, with Cliff, Caleb, and Paul, they've seen it all in college basketball. Yeah. They were at the game. I mean, you think back to the Iowa-Rutgers game. Ron Harper gets 2 free throws at the end of the game. Maybe he shouldn't have got. Iowa maybe felt like they should have won. So they've been in these close positions. Referees maybe controlled the game. So they should have been able to bounce back from that. They should have been able to go home, reset, figure out a way to prove why we deserve that one and why we deserve more going forward.
I got to say the crowd was unbelievable in that game too. Man, it was just great. Jersey Mike's is such a good home court advantage for them. I realize it did play out in this game for a win, but that's a great rivalry too. Yeah. I mean, it is with them in Seton Hall, and Sheen Holloway obviously is going to embrace it. And you can see the coaches have a lot of respect for one another. I think it's going to be fabulous. We're going to talk with Micah Shrewsberry in a bit, but quick thoughts on the Penn State perspective from Saturday's game. We'll talk about Illinois in a bit, but what do you make from Penn State going on the road and really pulling away at the end? I mean, I was calling this game. It wasn't in doubt for the last 6-7 minutes.
I look back to something Coach Shrews told his guys. If you don't think you can win, don't play in this game. Right. And you could tell everybody on that Penn State roster, they felt they could win. They shot the ball 50% from the field, 50% from 3, only 9 turnovers, and they had 7 of them in the second half. So they really took care of the ball in that first half. Jalen Pickett is just outstanding. He's a stat sheet stuffer. He's a walking bucket for himself, but also for his teammates. 7 assists in this one to go along with his 20 points. Andrew Funk made some big shots down the stretch. I mean, it was 2 seconds on the shot clock. Illinois was making a run. The crowd got into it. He just quiets them down with a buzzer beater at the shot clock to make it 3, send them up back by 8. And it seemed as though every time Illinois tried to make a run to creep back into it, Penn State had an answer. And one thing Penn State has in their building is a paint presence. Even without the traditional 5-man or a traditional 4-man, they throw the ball down there to Jalen Pickett in the post. You've got to send a double. You've got to send some help. He passes it well out of the double.
I think it is one of the most unique low post games that I have ever seen, right? Where it's fascinating what they do, and it was really interesting to see it in person. They're spread. No one gets a higher percentage of their points from three-pointers in the country than Penn State does. And again, there's over 350 teams. So when you're number one in the country, you are playing a unique style. And you would think about kind of if you're spreading shooters, you're spreading them around a post presence, right? But their post presence is Jalen Pickett basically backing his way down. And to your point, you can't really bring a double because if you do, he's such a good passer. He's one of the top 5 in the nation in assists. He'll find the open guy. So a lot of teams don't bring a double, and then he'll score. I mean, I don't know what you do. It's just a really different player.
You even saw times Illinois put Dane Danger on Jalen Pickett, and he'd take him in the post. So this is a guard taking a 7-footer into the post and either scoring for himself with his footwork or dishing it out. And sometimes Jalen Pickett can get down there and be too unselfish. He has times where maybe should think he should take a bad one or take a tough one, and he kicks it out. And Penn State is really good at making that second extra pass. Because out of the post, you may kick it to the opposite wing. They're going to close out to that one. But it's that next pass to the corner or up back to the wing where it's normally an open one. And Penn State has guys that can knock it down with Dredd making 5 threes. Lundy can get going. Those dudes play hard. They want to win for Coach Shrews. They've committed to defending since last year, so you know what you'll get there. You got 13 assists on 27 field goals, which means they're playing for each other. They like each other, and then they followed the game plan. They're tough enough to follow a game plan in a tough environment on the road. You make Illinois play a half-court basketball game. You keep them out of transition. You contest their jump shots, and you're going to compete on the glass, and that's the recipe for success.
This is a weird comparison because they're totally different players. They play a different position. But the decision-making that you have to make reminds me a little bit of Wisconsin with Ethan Happ.
No, I agree.
Right? Because, he was a center. He never shot the ball more than 10 feet beyond the rim in his entire career. But, man, he was such a good passer out of the post that you were so afraid to double off of him because he would make you pay. Again, Pickett backs you down. It's a different game. But it's the same conundrum
I get it.
of what in the world do you do? And man, Illinois they were in a pickle, to say the least. Purdue managed to stay unbeaten, topping Nebraska in overtime in Lincoln on Saturday. Fletcher Lawyer led the way with 22, despite hitting just 2 of 10 threes. He and Zach Edey, the only 2 Boilers in double figures. Purdue is now 10-0. Back here with Rayfeld Davis, and Purdue is one of several Big Ten contenders, frankly, that I don't think played great this weekend. Let's give a ton of credit to Nebraska. A really good game plan. They executed it extremely well. What do you make of the Boilers' performance, though, against Nebraska?
You got to find a way to win on the road. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to look good. Just find a way to win. Purdue was able to do that, even though they gave up 19 offensive rebounds, which is uncharacteristic for a Purdue team. They were about even on the glass and about even in the paint, which speaks to Nebraska's game plan. They really had a great one that came out and played hard. K-State Tominaga made some shots, but Purdue just stayed with it. And I love Zach Edey's performance. He didn't force it. He had times where he could have shot through a triple team, could have swung an elbow, try to get to the free throw line, but 5 for 7 from the field, 10 points, but he stayed engaged, 17 rebounds. And it's a way to, if you're a player, a young player, you're a big guy, they're doubling their triple team in the post. The way you stay in the game is go get off the glass, big fella. He went and got off the glass, a lot of kickouts to three-pointers, even though a lot of them didn't go in, they just found a way to keep chugging. And then with teams, they're going to double Zach Edey, they're going to triple Zach Edey. You see what teams do to Indiana with TJD. Another guy has to step up and beat you. And they forced someone from Purdue to beat him, and Fletcher Lawyer stepped up in that role. Although he shot 21 shots, he stepped up, and he was the guy that helped beat Nebraska on the road. And for a freshman to do that in that environment, it speaks volume to his character.
Again, give Nebraska a ton of credit. I mean, man, they followed the game plan well. Derek Walker did a fabulous job.
Good guy, good player. Yeah.
Man, he's really good. They are going to get some people this year. Nebraska, it feels like, is on a solid trajectory here. Casey Tamanaga, as you said, is become a really fun player
fun
to watch right
yeah.
now. His energy is infectious. What do you make of Indiana? They were down 19 points about 10 minutes in against Arizona, and to their credit, they fought hard the entire game and made a game of it. Never were able to get over the hump, obviously,
Right.
but there were moments where it felt like they put some game pressure on Arizona. It just ultimately felt like they had no answers for the Wildcats front line. I'm not sure many people are going to nationally. I'm not sure there's great shame in that. But what do you take from it and the fact that they were dominated as they were in the paint?
It looked, after a while, it looked like TJD just got uninspired in the paint a little bit with Tubelis, the way he run the floor. He reminded me a lot of Cody Zeller, just his quickness to get to the other end and post up right in the middle. But Arizona, 16 offensive rebounds. You got Race Thompson, you got TJD, Geronimo inside, Malik Renew. There were fans and spectators calling for Indiana maybe to have the best front court depth in the country. It's 16 offensive rebounds for 17 second chance points. You just got punked on the glass. And you've seen it against Rutgers, just getting punched in the mouth and never being able to respond. Arizona was plus 20 in the paint. Yeah. You have an All-American in TJD. You've got to get some production there. Although he was doubled and triple teamed, 11 points, 5 rebounds. All 5 of his rebounds came in the first half. He's got to be a guy that if you're not scoring the ball, go get it off the glass. Go help your team in other ways. And he can't go a half of basketball and not get a rebound. He's just too good, too talented, too big. The guards showed up, even without Hood Schifino. Xavier Johnson had a shaky first half, but ended with 11 points, 11 assists. They need their big man to compete with the best big man around the country, demand the basketball, want the ball, and they've got to start playing through him. But I thought the interior was definitely the difference. Before the game, I wouldn't have said that would be the difference. I would have thought that evened out and it would have turned into a guards game. But those bigs, Arizona, they had a special night.
He went 15 minutes, TJD, in the second half without taking a shot.
It's crazy, yeah. He's got to demand it. He's got to go, even if it's in a timeout, go to Coach Woodson. Coach Woodson has to have that type of respect for his best player and say, I need one, Coach. I need one to get my feel back, give me the ball. If TJD has become a willing passer, if they send a double, he can kick it out to Miller Kopp or Geronimo, one of those guys, to be able to make a play off the bounce. Miller Kopp and his pump fake, getting into his one dribble pull-up. The guards are playing better. Well, even without Hood Schifino, I think he would have impacted this game some. But if you're only going to get 11 and 5, and from TJD he goes 4 for 10 and fouls out of a game, I don't know if this Indiana team will be a Final Four contender like everyone thinks they could be and hopes they will be.
I do want to talk about the Illinois perspective on that Penn State game. This is an Illinois team that I think many of us believe can compete at the very top of the league, yet here they are now 0-2 in the Big Ten after losing to Maryland, losing this game to Penn State. And again, as I said, I called the game, kind of have a front row seat for it. It did not feel like the defensive intensity was there really from the opening tip for Illinois. And I sense from Brad Underwood's postgame comments, he may have shared that sentiment. I mean, he was subtle about it, so it was really hard to tell. But I think he was a little underwhelmed by his team. So what do you make of kind of where Illinois is? The highest of highs this week. I mean, they beat the number 2 team in the country in a huge game that everyone in the country was watching, and then they come back home and just do not get it done.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the post-game speech. I think about the halftime and just right after the game, that paint must have just been dripping off the walls in the locker room. I mean, he was on it. I look at Illinois, and I look at a guy like Sincere Harris. Illinois needs more of Sincere Harris on the floor. He plays hard, he's tough, he's gritty. I think he really matches what Brad Underwood wants from his players. You look at a guy like Terrence Shannon or Coleman Hawkins. Shannon goes 2 for 7, gets you 4 points and 2 rebounds. He's your leading scorer and your leading rebounder. He didn't have a good night. Coleman Hawkins spoke all season about positionless basketball. Everyone's going to be able to move the ball, score the ball. He goes 6, gets 7 rebounds, 6 assists, goes 3 for 8 from the field. That's not enough from your best 2 players. And if it's not offensively, those are 2 guys that can really get the job done defensively. They can get up in you. They can pressure the ball. Terrence Shannon can take things away and be one of the best defenders, not just in the conference, but in the country. But I think it's all about just staying engaged. You could tell from the post-game speech that after that Texas game, they had some rough practices. They didn't have anyone step up and be a leader, and then they came out and they just played hope you miss type of defense. Defense was optional. I know that's going to get changed around. You may see guys get benched and not play, but they've got to find a way to get out in transition. Only 4 fast break points in that one, not just depend on catching, shooting threes. Someone's got to be able to drive the paint, get some post-ups, get a paint presence.
Direct quote, complete lack of leadership and lack of effort.
Yeah, they got punked.
That pretty much summarizes what Brad Underwood thought. The beauty of college basketball is you can work on it.
Yep.
It is a long season, and you get a chance to figure it out. Our big stat brought to you by Gatorade. Penn State taking down number 17 Illinois on Saturday. They're one of 12 Big Ten teams now that has beaten a ranked opponent this year. That is far and away the most of any conference, more than double the Big 12, which is next with 5. Minnesota and Michigan are the only 2 schools that have yet to notch a ranked victory. Micah Shrewsberry, the head coach of Penn State, joining us now. He is today's big interview. Coach, first marquee win of the year for you guys. What does a victory like that on the road against a ranked team mean for you at this juncture in the season?
You know, it's something that we needed as a group. We had to get confidence. We had to have confidence in ourselves that we could go on the road and play like that for 40 minutes. And we've done it in short stretches, but to be able to do it at Illinois, one of the hardest places to win in our league, it gives our guys confidence and hopefully a springboard for the rest of the season.
Well, I had a great seat for it, obviously calling the game. And I was saying to Rafael earlier, you know, there's no doubt what your strategy is with this team, right? You are a 3-point shooting team. There is no team in the country that gets a higher percentage of its points from the 3 than you guys do. Is this something that is by design? In other words, that you set out when you're building your program to say, I'm going to build my team around 3-point shooters on the perimeter? Or was it more a function of you're in the off season, you're looking at who you can add in the portal, you're looking at who you have on your roster, and you're saying this is the best way for us to play this year?
I think, you know, as a coach, you have to look at what's going to be best for your team. And, you know, you have to build it around your best players. And Jalen Pickett's established himself as, you know, our best player, but, you know, I believe one of the best guards in this league. And you have to build a team that is good around him. And we have really good, you know, guys around him that can make shots. And so we want to do that. We want to take advantage of his strengths. If he can play with a bunch of guys that can make shots, like, we're going to lean into that. We don't want to force a square peg into a round hole. Like, we're going to be who we are, and we'll embrace that. And then, you know, if it changes next year, then it changes. If it changes the year after that, then we'll keep adjusting and doing things that fit our best players.
It's so unusual in that you are 3-point shooters spread around one player, but I think we often think about, when we think in those terms in basketball, about that player being a center. And in this case, that player is a guard, but he operates so well in the post and backs people down. And you put people in these conundrums, it seems like, on virtually every possession, where they have to make a decision of, are they going to double and try to get the ball out of Pickett's hands? And if they do that, they leave a shooter open, or are they going to allow him to operate one-on-one? At what point did you kind of realize that his skill set was so unique and that you could build around him in what is a really unconventional way to do it?
You know, we do it in a lot of different ways with him. He's so good with the ball in his hands. So, you know, if you put a certain defender on him, then he'll go down into the post. If you put a different defender on him, then he'll play out of pick and rolls and find guys that way. He's such a high IQ player, but the guys around him are high IQ. So they do a good job of moving on penetration, getting into his vision so he can see him. And then just creating movement so we take, you know, kind of all the eyes off of him at times if he needs to. So his versatility, his IQ really makes us, you know, hard to guard.
Well, that is for sure. He is a transfer. Andrew Funk is a transfer as well. You've got a few others, Cameron Winter on this roster as well. What's the balancing act? I mean, you got a top 30 class this year, the freshmen this season. You got another top 30 class coming in next year. How do you decide, as you're kind of constructing in this day and age a roster, how much you're going to build around transfers and how much you're going to build around freshmen?
think for us, the biggest thing is finding fits, finding guys that'll fit Penn State, finding guys that'll fit what we want to do offensively and defensively. And then once we get those guys here, build them into the best players that we can. And the kind of minutes that our young guys played, Kanye Clary and Evan Mahaffey came in and gave us big minutes. It may not look like it in the stat sheet, but getting those guys confidence, getting Keba Jai and Demetrius Lilly and Jameel Brown, so those guys are ready to help us next year. But making them the best players that they can be throughout this whole year, whether they're getting on the court or not, we're investing in those guys 100%. And then we'll find guys for need out of the transfer portal if we need to, but it'll be fits for Penn State. And that's what Cam Winter is. That's what Andrew Funk is. That's who Mikey Hinn's been. That's who Jalen Pickett's been for us. Guys that fit our philosophy. They're team first guys. They want to help us do something special here, and we'll continue to look for guys like that to fit our program around the freshmen we're getting also.
Well, speaking of those freshmen you're getting, there's one you didn't have to look very far for. Your son Braden is in the next class, so you had to look maybe down the hallway in your house. How does one recruit their own son? Like, do you do a home visit? How does that work?
It was probably one of the hardest recruitments because, you know, you don't know. I've never coached him ever in his life, and sometimes when he and I work out on the court together, it doesn't always end well. So I allowed one of our assistant coaches. So Adam Fisher recruited him, and he recruited him like he was some kid in Washington State, not like a kid that lives in the same house as me or down the street. And he did a good job of doing that. But I wanted it to be Braden's idea that he wanted to come play here at Penn State and come play for me. And, you know, luckily I had some good guys around me like Fran McCaffrey, who I could talk to about the experiences that he had coaching his sons. And he had nothing but great things to say. And I think that made it a little bit easier to let this come to fruition.
I love your story, Coach, because you are a grinder. I mean, you've been at all levels of basketball, including as a player. You played at Division II Hanover, where your jobs included, among other things, driving the team van as a player to games. At what point did you realize you wanted to be a coach as you were going through that?
I think really early because, you know, my playing style was not conducive to me playing after college. There's not many slow point guards that can't shoot grinding it out in Europe somewhere. So Hanover's been a great breeding ground for coaches, and there are a lot of us at the small college level, the high school level. There's Division I guys now. We've put a lot of guys out there that are having success at all levels of basketball, and I think that's gotten me ready. I wanted to stay around the game. I wanted to have a chance to, you know, continue to be around the team, continue to try and impact people and help them learn the things that I've learned. So early on, I knew coaching was what I wanted to do.
Your first head coaching job was Indiana South Bend, where, among other things, you had to wash your own team's uniforms. What do you learn from coaching at that level, where there is so much more on your plate than there is for a Division I coach?
You know what, at that level, at the NAIA level, being the head coach that early, I was allowed to make mistakes. That was the biggest thing. You know, nobody was looking at me and, you know, looking at my coaching philosophy or what I was trying to do. All I was trying to do was learn and try and help those guys that were there have a great experience. And whether I was an assistant coach at the Division III level, I got a chance to do the same things. Be hands-on. You know, instead of being a coach that's maybe at the Division I level that's kind of off the floor, you don't get those opportunities to be hands-on, to perfect your craft. Like, college basketball is one of the only places in the country that doesn't allow you to work on yourself or work on your craft as you're growing through the game. So working at the lower levels really helped me, and that's why we're trying to fight to get more access for younger coaches so they can get the same experience, especially at the Division I level.
Well, you were a Division I assistant, of course, as well, with Brad Stevens and with Matt Painter in the Big Ten, where among your proteges was a young Raphael Davis. He's on with me today, as I know you know. What's your best Raphael Davis story?
You know what? There's a couple of things. My time at Purdue was great, and I loved every bit of it. As I was sitting here watching, you guys were talking about Fletcher Lawyer, and Purdue's always been good when they've had good players from Fort Wayne. So, when they had Fletcher Lawyer now, when they had Biggie, like really good players, and they have really good teams. Like, they survived with Raphael Davis and Grady Eifert. Like, they were not good players from Fort Wayne. So anything that they got from them was a bonus. Any championships that were won was great coaching and great program happening right there. Raphael is he and I, man, I love to see him and what he's doing now because, him as a player and now how he's grown to really perfecting his craft now, but the things he's doing off the court is great. And I tested him early. After his freshman year, we started doing some individual workouts, and I made him wear these dribble goggles, and they're bad, like these black rim dribble goggles that you give to second and third graders. But I did it just because I wanted to see what his makeup was. Did he really want to be good or not? And he didn't care. It wasn't about looking cool for Raphael. It was about how can I get better and how can I get on the court and help my team win.
Great stuff. Micah, this was a ton of fun. Again, congratulations on the win. It was really fun to watch on Saturday, and I trust we will have many more chances to intersect as the season goes on.
Thanks a lot.